I woke up after 10 hours of spinal surgery to 92 missed calls. I thought someone had died. Instead, a voicemail from my father announced they had sold my condo for $425,000 while I was under anesthesia. All to pay for my sister's wedding. They think they have stripped me bare. They do not know I am holding a secret that will destroy their perfect family right in front of their guests. My name is Lindsay Scott. I am 36 years old, and the first thing I realized when I opened my eyes was not that I was alive, but that my throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of broken glass. The recovery room was blindingly white. It was that specific, sterile, clinical white that leaves no room for shadows or comfort. I tried to swallow, but my body refused. There was a thick, dry taste of antiseptic and old blood in my mouth. My lower back, the site where a team of surgeons had spent the last 10 hours fusing vertebrae and correcting a decade of agony, felt non-existent. It was heavy, numb, a block of concrete where my spine used to be. A nurse hovered over me. She looked like an angel in blue scrubs, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. She was saying something about success, about vitals, about pain management. I blinked, trying to clear the fog of anesthesia that clung to my brain like wet wool. "You have been under for a long time, Lindsay," the nurse said, her voice finally sharpening into focus. 10 hours? You did great. I wanted to ask for water, but all that came out was a dry rasp. She understood. She brought a cup with a straw to my lips. The water was cold, shocking my system awake. As the fog receded, the first wave of pain hit, not from the incision, but a deep, throbbing ache in my legs as the nerves began to fire again. "Your phone has been blowing up," the nurse said, her tone shifting from professional to sympathetic. She reached over to the bedside table. I usually do not disturb patients right away, but it has been vibrating non-stop for the last 3 hours. I thought it might be an emergency. She handed me the device. It felt heavy in my weak hand. I squinted at the screen. The brightness stung my eyes. I expected to see a message from Owen, my husband. He was on a flight to Tokyo for business, a trip he could not cancel. Much as he had wanted to be here, I expected a text saying he had landed, or that he was thinking of me. Instead, I saw the notifications, 92 missed calls, 47 text messages, the names on the screen blurred together. Mom, Dad, Kelsey, Mom, Dad. My heart hammered against my ribs. The monitor beside me sped up, the beep, beep, beep becoming a frantic rhythm. My first thought, the thought any daughter would have, was that someone had died. A car accident, a heart attack. Why else would they call 92 times while I was in spinal surgery? My thumb hovered over the most recent notification. It was a voicemail from my father. Harold Scott. I did not call back. I could not speak yet. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear, my hand trembling not from emotion, but from the aftershocks of the anesthesia. "Lindsay, it is Dad." His voice was not frantic. It was not tearful. It was cheerful. It was the voice he used when he had successfully negotiated a discount on a used car, or when he managed to talk a waiter into taking an expired coupon. It was a voice entirely devoid of concern for the woman lying in a hospital bed with metal rods recently inserted into her back. "Look, we could not get a hold of you, obviously," he chuckled, a dry, scratching sound. "But we had to move fast. The offer came in this morning. Cash buyer. No contingencies. We tried to ask you, but you were under, and Mom said we could not wait. So, we used the power of attorney. We signed the papers an hour ago." I frowned, the phone pressing hard against my ear. "Signed what papers?" "We sold the condo." "Honey," he said. The words floated in the air, disjointed and absurd. "Got a great price. $425,000. It is going to clear just in time. Kelsey was panicking about the venue deposit and the catering upgrade, and this solves everything. We knew you would want to help your sister. We will talk when you wake up. Great news. Right? Love you." The voicemail ended. The silence that followed was louder than the hospital machines. I lowered the phone. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I tried to make the math work in my head. Sold the condo, my condo, the 2-bedroom unit in the city that I had bought 5 years ago, the one I had scraped for, the one I had worked 60-hour weeks to afford the down payment for, the one that was the single tangible proof that I was an adult who stood on her own 2 feet. $425,000, gone. And the reason Kelsey was panicking about the venue, my sister, Kelsey, was 29 years old. She was a content creator whose primary content involved unboxing luxury items she could not afford and crying about anxiety to her 20,000 followers. Her wedding was in 19 days. It was going to be a black tie affair at a resort on the East Coast, a spectacle that my parents could not afford, that Kelsey definitely could not afford, and that, apparently, I was now paying for. I felt a sensation that was distinct from the surgical pain. It started in my stomach and spread outward, a creeping frost that numbed me more effectively than the morphine dripping into my IV. They had sold my home. And they had done it while I was cut open on an operating table. I replayed the timeline in my mind. They knew my surgery schedule. I had told them weeks ago. I had sent them the details, foolishly thinking they might want to know when their daughter would be in recovery. They had not used that date to send flowers. They had used it as a tactical window. They knew I would be unconscious. They knew I would be unreachable. They knew Owen was in the air, crossing the Pacific Ocean, unable to stop them. We used the power of attorney. That phrase stuck in my mind like a fishhook. Years ago, before I met Owen, before I bought the condo, I had signed a limited power of attorney when I went backpacking in Europe for 3 months. It was meant to let them handle my student loan payments from my checking account if something went wrong. That was almost 10 years ago. I thought it had expired. I thought I had revoked it. Or maybe, in my stupidity, I had signed something else amidst the pile of medical release forms they had helped me organize last week. It did not matter how they did it. What mattered was that they believed they had the right. The nurse returned, checking my IV bag. "Are you okay, Mrs. Scott? Your heart rate is elevated. Is the pain increasing?" "No," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, like grinding stones. "The pain is fine. Do you want to call your family back?" she asked, gesturing to the phone still clutched in my hand. They seemed very worried. I almost laughed. A dry, humorless sound escaped my throat. Worried? No. They were not worried. They were excited. They were high on the adrenaline of a $425,000 theft that they had rationalized as family duty. "No," I said. "Do not let them in. If anyone comes to visit, tell them I am not up for visitors. Strict orders." The nurse looked surprised, but she nodded. "Of course, rest is best." She left me alone again. I looked at the phone. 92 calls. They wanted to be the first to tell me. They wanted to spin the narrative before I could get angry. They wanted to frame it as a done deal, something that I just had to accept because family helps family. They expected me to wake up, scream, cry, and then eventually roll over and accept it because I always accepted it, because I was Lindsay, the responsible one, the one who had a job, the one who didn't need the help, but I was not crying. It is strange what absolute betrayal does to a person. You expect fire. You expect an explosion. But this was ice. It was a clarity so sharp it cut. I unlocked my phone. My fingers were stiff. But I managed to open my messaging app. I found Owen's thread. The last message from him was from 12 hours ago. "Love you. See you on the other side. You are going to do great." I typed a reply. My thumbs moved slowly. They sold my home while I was in surgery. I stared at the words. They looked too simple to convey the magnitude of the destruction. I backspaced. I needed to be clearer. They sold my condo while I was in surgery. I hit send. I knew he would not see it for another 8 hours. He was somewhere over the ocean, disconnected from the world. I was alone. The panic tried to rise up then. I thought about my furniture, my books, the painting I had bought in New Orleans hanging over the sofa. Were they gone too? Had they sold it furnished? Or had they tossed my life into a dumpster to stage the place for a quick sale? $425,000. That was not just money. That was my safety net. That was my freedom. I closed my eyes and took a breath. The oxygen tube in my nose hissed softly. I had one call to make. I did not scroll to Mom. I did not scroll to Dad. I definitely did not scroll to Kelsey. I searched for Rowe. Calvin. Calvin Rowe was a real estate attorney I had used when I bought the place. He was not a family friend. He was not warm. He was a shark in a three-piece suit who charged $400 an hour and hated small talk. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Rowe speaking. His voice was crisp, professional. "Calvin," I croaked. "It is Lindsay Scott." "Lindsay." He sounded surprised. "I thought you were going in for surgery today. Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am in the recovery room. I just woke up. My father left me a voicemail. He says he sold my condo this morning using a power of attorney while I was unconscious." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that carried the weight of a professional assessing a disaster. "Did you authorize this sale, Lindsay?" Calvin asked. His tone had shifted. He was no longer speaking to a client. He was deposing a witness. "No." "Did you authorize a power of attorney recently?" "No, not recently. Maybe 10 years ago. For a trip. A 10-year-old POA usually would not fly for a real estate transaction of this size, unless the title company was asleep at the wheel or—" He trailed off, then corrected himself. "Or unless there was fraud involved. Who is the closing attorney?" "I do not know," I said. "I do not know anything. They just said it is sold. $425,000. To pay for my sister's wedding." I heard the sound of typing on the other end. Furious. Rapid clicking. "Lindsay, I need you to focus. I am going to pull the county records right now. If they close today, the deed transfer might not be recorded yet. But the funds have likely moved. I need you to do one thing. Do not speak to them. Do not text them. Do not email them. Anything you say can be used to argue that you retroactively approve this. If they call, let it go to voicemail. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "I am going to stop this money if I can." Calvin said, "But if it is already in a wedding vendor's account, it is going to be a war. You need to rest. I will be at the hospital in the morning. We are going to need affidavits." "Calvin," I interrupted. "Yes." "They think they have won," I whispered. My throat was raw, but the words came out with a terrifying precision. "They think because I am in this bed, because I cannot walk, that I am powerless. They think I am just the bank." "We will remind them you are not," Calvin said. "No," I said. "I want more than that." I looked at the white ceiling again. The pain in my back was a dull roar now, a constant reminder of my physical vulnerability, but my mind was sharpening. "Find out everything," I told him. "I want to know who the notary was. I want to know where the money went. Every cent." "I will," Calvin promised. "Get some sleep. Lindsay." He hung up. I lowered the phone to my chest. The room was quiet again. My parents were probably popping champagne right now. Kelsey was probably booking the upgraded floral arrangement, the one with the imported orchids she had cried about wanting last week. They were celebrating. They were toasting to their resourcefulness, to how they had saved the wedding. They had 19 days until the ceremony. 19 days of thinking they had pulled off the perfect heist. 19 days of smiling at me, patting my hand, and telling me I should be happy to contribute to the family's joy. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness take me. But this time, it wasn't the anesthesia. It was a plan forming in the blackness. They thought they had stripped me of my biggest asset. They thought the condo was the only thing of value I had. But as I drifted off, a memory surfaced, a conversation from a week ago with Calvin. One I had dismissed at the time because I was too focused on the surgery. He had mentioned a discrepancy in a property tax search, a name match. Lindsay Scott. I whispered into the empty room. "They think they have won." but they do not know I just realized I own something else, something I did not even know I had. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one paying the price. 7 weeks before I woke up to 92 missed calls. I was sitting in a leather chair in Dr. Evans' office, looking at a grayscale image of my own skeleton. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol and expensive coffee. Dr. Evans, a man whose hands were insured for more than my entire lifetime earnings, pointed a pen at the L4 and L5 vertebrae on the screen. "It is time. Lindsay," he said, "we cannot manage this with injections anymore. If you want to walk without a cane by the time you are 40, we need to fuse this, now." I stared at the screen. For 3 years, pain had been the background noise of my life. It was a high-pitched hum when I sat at my desk, a dull roar when I tried to sleep, and a sharp scream if I twisted the wrong way. The idea of surgery was terrifying. They were going to slice through muscle, scrape away bone, and bolt me back together with titanium, but the idea of living like this for another decade was worse. "Okay," I said. "When?" "January 30th, he said. "It is the first opening I have. It is a 10-hour procedure. Recovery will be brutal for the first 6 weeks. You will need full-time assistance for at least the first 7 days. You cannot bend, you cannot twist, and you certainly cannot lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk." I nodded, my mind already racing to my calendar. January 30th. That gave me 7 weeks to prepare. 7 weeks to wrap up my projects at work. 7 weeks to prepare my body. I walked out of the medical center into the crisp winter air of the city. My first instinct was to call Owen, but I knew he was in a client meeting. So I did what any daughter is conditioned to do, despite years of evidence that I shouldn't. I called my mother. Diane picked up on the second ring. The background noise was chaotic, clinking glass, muffled voices, and soft jazz. "Mom," I said, "I just got out of the doctor's office." "Oh, Lindsay, hold on," she said, her voice distracted. I heard her cover the phone with her hand, though not well enough. "No, not the lilies. I said peonies. Kelsey specifically said peonies imply wealth. Do we look like we are buying lilies?" She came back on the line. "Sorry. The florist is incompetent. We are trying to finalize the table arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. It is a nightmare. What were you saying?" "I am having surgery," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "The spinal fusion. They scheduled it for the 30th of next month." "The 30th?" Diane sighed. A long, dramatic exhale that suggested I had just inconvenienced her greatly. "That is barely 3 weeks before the wedding. Lindsay, you are not going to be in a wheelchair for the photos. Are you? Kelsey wants everyone standing for the formal portraits." I closed my eyes, standing on the sidewalk as pedestrians rushed past me. "I should be able to stand by then." "Mom, but I'm calling because I need help. The surgery is 10 hours. Owen has that massive installation project in Tokyo around that time. He is trying to move it, but if he cannot, I am going to be alone. I need someone to drive me home from the hospital and maybe stay for 2 days until I can manage the stairs." There was a pause. I could hear the florist in the background asking about vase shapes. "Lindsay, honey," Diane said, her voice taking on that pitying, condescending tone she used when I asked for anything. "You know how crazy things are right now. The wedding is in February. We have the final fittings, the catering tasting, and Kelsey is having a nervous breakdown about the RSVP list. I cannot just drop everything to come sit in your apartment and watch you sleep. Can't you hire a nurse? You have a good job. You can afford it." You have a good job. You can afford it. That was the family motto when it came to me. "Right," I said. The cold anger wasn't there yet. Just a familiar, dull exhaustion. "I will figure it out. Enjoy the flowers." I hung up. I didn't feel surprised. I just felt silly for asking. I worked as a senior project manager at Redfield Meridian Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm that specialized in logistics software. My job was to take chaos and turn it into order. I managed million-dollar budgets, wrangled temperamental developers, and ensured deadlines were met with military precision. If I could coordinate a software rollout across 3 time zones, I could coordinate my own convalescence. I spent the next week treating my surgery like a project. I created a spreadsheet, row 1 post-op care. I hired a private nursing service for the first 48 hours. It cost $1,200. Money I would have preferred to save, but I paid it without blinking. Row 2 environment. I bought a grabber tool so I wouldn't have to bend. I bought a shower chair. I arranged for a hospital bed rental to be set up in the living room of my condo because my bedroom was upstairs and Dr. Evans said stairs were forbidden for week 1. Row 3 nutrition. I spent a Sunday cooking. I made 21 meals, soups, stews, high-protein pasta dishes. I portioned them into glass containers, labeled them with dates, and stacked them in the freezer. I did all of this alone. Owen felt terrible. We sat at our small kitchen island one night, splitting a bottle of cheap red wine. The air between us was heavy. Our marriage wasn't a romance novel. It was a partnership forged in the fires of student debt and the high cost of living in the city. We loved each other, but we were tired. We were always tired. I can tell them I cannot go, Owen said, looking at his hands. Screw the Tokyo contract. You cannot, I said firmly. That bonus is what we are using to pay off the last of your car loan. If you bail, they give the project to Miller. We need the cash. Owen, especially with me being on short-term disability for 6 weeks, my paycheck is going to be 60% of normal. It is not right, he said. Your parents live 40 minutes away. Kelsey lives 20 minutes away. One of them should be here. Kelsey is busy being the main character, I said, taking a sip of wine. Let's talk about Kelsey. My sister was 29 going on 16. She described herself as a lifestyle curator on social media. She had 50,000 followers, but if you looked closely, the engagement numbers didn't add up, suggesting about 30,000 of them were bots bought from a farm in Eastern Europe. Kelsey had been planning this wedding for 2 years. The groom, Miles, was a decent guy from a family with old money, or at least money that was older than ours. To secure him, Kelsey had convinced herself she needed to project an image of equivalent wealth. The wedding was set for the Sterling Cove Resort. It was the kind of place where a glass of water cost $12 and the napkins were made of Egyptian cotton. The budget had started at $50,000. It was now hovering near $150,000. And who was funding this theater? My parents, mostly, but since my parents were house rich and cash poor, the pressure rolled downhill. 2 weeks before the surgery, my father called me at work. Lindsay, he said, skipping the pleasantries, we have a hiccup with the band. They raised their fee. We need another $8,000 for the deposit by Friday. I rubbed my temples. I was looking at a Gantt chart that was flashing red. Dad, I already gave you $10,000 for the dress and $5,000 for the engagement party. I do not have another $8,000 lying around. You have that bonus coming, he said. He knew about my finances. He always asked questions that seemed innocent until he used the answers against me. Come on, Linz, it is your sister. She is crying her eyes out. You do not want to ruin her big day over a few $1,000, do you? You are the successful one. Share the wealth. The successful one. When I graduated college, with honors. My parents didn't come. They said the drive was too long and gas was too expensive. They sent a card with a $50 check inside. When Kelsey graduated from beauty school, a program she quit 3 months later, they threw her a party that cost $4,000 because she was feeling lost and needed encouragement. When I bought my condo, my beautiful 2-bedroom sanctuary in the gentrifying part of the city, I invited them over for dinner to celebrate. My mother spent the entire evening criticizing the paint color and asking if I was sure I could afford the mortgage alone. She never said congratulations. She just said, well, hope the market does not crash. That condo was appraised at $425,000 now. I had bought it for $290,000 5 years ago. I had put 20% down, money I saved by working double shifts and skipping vacations for 4 years. Every square inch of that drywall, every tile in the bathroom, Every creak in the floorboards belonged to me. It was the only thing in my life that I didn't have to ask permission for. It was my fortress. I told my father no regarding the $8,000. I have surgery in 2 weeks, Dad, I said. I need my liquidity. I am going to have medical bills. He grunted. Fine, we will figure it out. We always do. You are getting very selfish lately. Lindsay. He hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling that familiar mixture of guilt and rage. They trained me to be the safety net, and then they despised me for having the resources to be one. Then came the moment that should have alerted me. The red flag I missed because I was too focused on the physical pain in my spine. 1 week before the surgery, my mother stopped by. This was rare. She usually only came if she needed something, or if she wanted to drop off Kelsey's old clothes for me to donate, because she couldn't be bothered to go to Goodwill. She came in, looking frantic as always. She held a stack of wedding invitations she wanted me to address because my handwriting was better as I sat at the table, writing names in calligraphy, ignoring the shooting pains in my legs. She walked around my living room. She touched the books. She opened a drawer in the sideboard. "You are so organized," she said. It sounded like an accusation. "I have to be," I said without looking up. "With this surgery," she said, pausing by my filing cabinet. "It is major. Right general anesthesia. 10 hours. "Yes, Mom." "It is scary," she said. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw genuine maternal concern. "What if, well, God forbid, what if something happens?" "I will be fine," I said. "It is routine for Dr. Evans." "But you never know," she pressed. "Do you have your affairs in order? Like, does Owen know where everything is? The insurance, the deed to the house." I stopped writing. I looked at her. "The deed." "Well, yes," she said, flustering slightly. "If something happens to you, we do not want the state taking everything. Probate is a nightmare. I was just reading about it. You keep those papers in a safe, right?" "I keep them in the fireproof box in the closet," I said. "Owen knows the combination." "Good," she said. "That is good. Smart." She changed the subject immediately to the wedding cake flavors, lemon versus vanilla. I let it go. I thought she was being morbid. I thought she was having a moment of anxiety about her daughter dying on the table. I did not realize she wasn't worried about me dying. She was worried about accessing the asset before I woke up. I finished addressing the invitations. She took them, gave me a quick, distracted hug, and left. "Good luck next week," she called out as she walked to her car. "We will be thinking of you. I will try to visit if the wedding planning slows down." I locked the door behind her. I stood in the silence of my condo. The late afternoon sun was hitting the hardwood floors, turning them a warm honey color. I loved this place. I loved the way the light hit the wall. I loved that the mortgage bill had my name on it. And only my name. I sat down on the sofa, the one I had saved for 6 months to buy. I looked around at the life I had built. I felt safe here. I felt like I had constructed a wall high enough to keep the chaos of my family out. I was so naive. I didn't know that while I was carefully labeling soup containers and arranging my post-op pillows, my family was already consulting with a corrupt notary. I didn't know that my no to the $8,000 hadn't stopped them. It had just forced them to find a bigger source of funds. I walked into the hospital on January 30th at 5 in the morning. Owen kissed me goodbye at the surgical prep doors, his eyes red. "I will call you the second I land," he promised. "Go," I said. "Make the money. We need it." I laid down on the gurney. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. 10. I hope the nurse shows up on time. 9. I hope Owen's flight is safe. 8. I hope Kelsey likes her stupid flowers. 7. I hope the world went black. And while I slept, they dismantled my life. They took the fireproof box. They took the keys. They took the one thing that proved I was more than just their resource. When I woke up, I wasn't Lindsay the homeowner anymore. I was Lindsay the homeless, the betrayed, the fool. But 7 weeks ago, sitting in that sunlit living room, I didn't know any of that. I just thought I was tired. I didn't know that the real surgery wasn't on my spine. It was going to be the surgical removal of my family from my life, and I wouldn't be the one using anesthesia to anyone else. Unit 4B was just 850 square feet of drywall and laminate flooring suspended 3 stories above a noisy street in Chicago. It was not a penthouse. It did not have a view of the lake unless you pressed your face against the glass of the guest bedroom window and angled your head 45 degrees to the left. The kitchen was a galley style, narrow enough that if I opened the oven door and the refrigerator at the same time, they would collide. The balcony was barely large enough for 2 folding chairs and a dying fern, but to me, that condo was not a building. It was a trophy, lying in the hospital bed, staring at the sterile acoustic tiles. I closed my eyes and tried to summon the feeling of my Saturday mornings. I pictured the light, the way the sun hit the granite countertop at exactly 8 in the morning, turning the flecks of mica in the stone into gold dust. I could smell the coffee brewing, dark roast, expensive, the kind my father would call a waste of money. I could hear the distant rumble of the L train, a sound that used to annoy me but eventually became the heartbeat of my independence. I bought that place when I was 31. I did not buy it with a trust fund. I did not buy it with a down payment gift from my parents. I did not buy it because I married rich. I bought it because for 4 years, I worked my day job at Redfield Meridian until 6 in the evening, and then I drove for a rideshare app until 2 in the morning. I bought it because I spent my weekends freelance copy editing technical manuals for dishwasher parts. I bought it because while Kelsey was posting photos of her brunches in Tulum and begging Mom for rent money, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches and putting every spare dollar into a high-yield savings account. I remember the day I signed the closing papers. It was in a title company office that smelled like lemon polish and anxiety. My hand cramped from signing my name so many times. Lindsay Scott, Lindsay Scott, Lindsay Scott. When the title agent slid the keys across the mahogany table toward me, I felt a physical shift in my chest. It was heavier than joy. It was relief. It was the moment I realized that no matter what happened, no matter if my parents went bankrupt again, no matter if they favored Kelsey, no matter if I was the black sheep, I had a door that I could lock. I had a floor that I owned in America. We talk a lot about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. It is mostly a myth, but in that moment, holding those brass keys, I felt like I had actually done it. I had won my own life. My family never understood that. To Harold and Diane, my success was not a source of pride. It was a natural resource. They looked at my job, my car, and my condo the way a farmer looks at a milk cow. They assumed it was there to be used. If I had it, and they needed it, then obviously it belonged to the family pot. But the pot only flowed one way. If Kelsey needed a car, they raided their retirement. If Kelsey needed a vacation to find herself, they put it on a credit card. If I bought a new coat, my mother would touch the fabric and ask how much it cost, her voice dripping with judgment, implying that I was wasting money that could have been used to help them. They never saw the irony. They never saw that the reason I had money was because I didn't spend it on appearances. I spent it on security. I thought about the time, 3 years ago, when they almost lost their house, the house I grew up in, the house where Kelsey still had her childhood bedroom preserved like a shrine. My father had made a bad investment, some sure thing in cryptocurrency that his golf buddy recommended. They were 6 months behind on the mortgage. The foreclosure notice was taped to the front door. They called me in a panic, not to ask for advice, but to ask for $40,000. Just like that. "We will lose everything. Lindsay," my mother had sobbed into the phone. "How can you sit there with your fancy job and let us be homeless?" I told them I didn't have the cash. That was a lie. I had the money. It was sitting in my emergency fund, earmarked for exactly this kind of disaster, or for a down payment on a bigger place one day. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that if I wrote them a check directly, 2 things would happen. First, they would never pay me back. Second, and far worse, they would resent me for it. They would hate me for being the one to save them. It would shift the power dynamic in a way their egos couldn't handle. And they would punish me for it by minimizing the favor, by claiming I owed them for raising me. So I didn't give them the money. Instead, I called a lawyer friend from college. I set up a shell LLC. I had the LLC purchase their delinquent debt from the bank and restructure it into a manageable payment plan with zero interest. I paid the $40,000 to the bank anonymously to bring the loan current. They never knew. To this day, they think the bank made a clerical error or that God intervened. They think they got lucky. I did that. I saved their roof. I saved Kelsey's shrine. And I did it without asking for a thank you. I did it because, despite everything, despite the neglect and the favoritism, I wanted them to be safe. It was a tired, heavy kind of love. The kind of love that feels more like an obligation than a joy. And how did they repay me? They waited until I was unconscious. They waited until a surgeon was drilling screws into my spine. And then they sold my sanctuary. They didn't just sell an asset. They sold my safety. They sold the physical manifestation of my hard work. They looked at my condo and didn't see me. They saw $425,000 that could be turned into a wedding venue and a catering contract for their golden child. The phone in my hand buzzed, snapping me back to the sterile white room. It was Owen. I answered on the first ring. Lindsay. His voice was a mixture of static and panic. He sounded breathless, like he was running through an airport terminal. Oh my God, I just landed. I just got your text. What do you mean? What do you mean they sold it? Hearing his voice almost broke me. The tears prickled behind my eyes, hot and sudden, but I swallowed them down. I couldn't afford to cry. Crying was for victims. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a plaintiff. They used a power of attorney, I said. My voice was raspy, but steady. Dad left a voicemail. They signed the papers this morning. The deal is done. The money is gone. That is insane, Owen shouted. I could hear the background noise of Tokyo's Narita Airport, announcements in Japanese, the rush of crowds. That is illegal, Lindsay. Tell me you are joking. They cannot just sell a house in a day. They said it was a cash buyer, I explained. No contingencies. A quick close. They probably listed it way under market value to move it fast. $425,000 is low for that neighborhood now. They virtually gave it away to get the cash for Kelsey. I am getting on the next flight back, Owen said immediately. I am turning around. I do not care about the job. I am coming home, and I am calling the police. I am going to have your father arrested. No, I said. The word came out sharper than I intended. What do you mean? No, Owen demanded. Lindsay, they stole $500,000 from us. This is grand larceny. This is prison time. Owen, listen to me, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. If you call the police now, they will spin it. They will say I agreed to it verbally and then got confused by the medication. They will say it is a civil dispute. They will cry to the family. Kelsey will go on Instagram and paint me as the villain who is trying to send her elderly parents to jail right before her wedding. I do not care what Kelsey does on Instagram. I do, I hissed. The pain in my back flared, a sharp reminder of my limitations. I care because I am not just going to get the money back. Owen, I am going to expose them. I am going to make sure that when this blows up, there is absolutely nowhere for them to hide. I need you to stay in Tokyo. What? Stay in Tokyo, I repeated. Do the job. We need the money now more than ever. If I lose the condo, we need your bonus to pay the legal fees. I have Calvin on it. Calvin Rowe. Yes, he is pulling the records. He is tracking the money. I took a deep breath, the air hissing through the oxygen cannula. I need you to trust me. Do not post anything. Do not call them. Do not let them know you know. Let them think they got away with it. Let them spend the money. Let them dig the hole so deep they can never climb out. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Owen breathing. I knew he was furious. I knew he wanted to protect me. But I also knew he respected me. He knew that I didn't make decisions based on emotion. You are scary when you are like this, he said softly. I know, I said. I have to be. Okay, he said, his voice resigned but firm. I will stay. I will do the presentation. But the second it is over, I am on a plane. And Lindsay, yeah, I love you. And I am sorry I am not there to hold your hand. I know, I said. Go make us some money. Owen. I hung up the phone. The silence returned. But it felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was charged. I felt a strange vibration. A hum of energy that had nothing to do with the hospital machinery. I lay there, thinking about the condo again. I thought about the empty space where my furniture used to be. I thought about strangers walking through my kitchen, opening my cabinets, judging my life. The violation made my skin crawl. But then, the phone buzzed again. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. I looked at the screen. It was from Calvin Rowe. I expected a message about the notary. I expected him to tell me he had found the fraudulent document or the bank transfer records. I opened the message. Lindsay, I have been digging through the county registrar to find the deed transfer for your condo. I found it, but I found something else. I frowned, staring at the glowing letters. A second message popped up. You told me the condo was the only property you owned, I typed back, my fingers clumsy. That is all I have. 3 little dots appeared, dancing on the screen as he typed. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Finally, the message came through. That is not what the records say. I am looking at a deed for a single-family home in the suburbs. It is held in a trust, but the beneficiary is listed as Lindsay Scott. It has been in your name for 6 years. My heart stopped. I do not understand. I typed, What house I need you to confirm something for me. Calvin wrote back, Because if this is accurate, you did not just lose a condo today. You might have been the landlord of a property you did not even know existed. I lowered the phone. The room seemed to tilt. A house. A trust. I had no rich relatives. I had no secret benefactors. The only people in my life were my parents, who were terrible with money, and my grandmother, who had died 6 years ago with nothing but a collection of porcelain dolls and a small life insurance policy that barely covered her funeral. Or so I thought. A property you did not even know existed. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept over me. If I owned a house who was living in it, I stared at the black screen of my phone, and for the first time since waking up, the anger wasn't just cold, it was curious. They sold my condo to pay for a wedding, but what if they had been hiding something much bigger than a wedding fund? What if the $425,000 was just the tip of the iceberg? I messaged Calvin back one word. Address. I waited. The answer would change everything. I didn't know it yet. But the address he was about to send wasn't just a location. It was the key to the family secret that had kept me in the dark, working myself to the bone, while I sat on a fortune I couldn't touch. The nurse walked in to check my vitals. Blood pressure is a little high. Lindsay, she noted, looking at the monitor. Are you in pain? No, I said, my eyes fixed on the phone, waiting for the vibration. I am just starting to wake up. Calvin Rowe walked into my hospital room at 7 in the morning the next day. He did not look like a man visiting a sick friend. He looked like a man preparing to foreclose on a funeral home. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car, and he carried a thick, expandable leather file folder that looked heavy enough to break a toe if he dropped it. He pulled the visitor chair close to my bed. The metal legs screeching against the linoleum floor, the sound made me wince, sending a fresh spike of pain down my fused spine, but I did not ask him to stop. I needed the sharp reality of it. How are you feeling? He asked. It was a perfunctory question. He was already opening the folder. Like I have been run over by a truck and then billed for the gas, I said. Show me. Calvin did not hesitate. He slid a document onto the rolling tray table, right next to my half-eaten cup of gelatin. This, he said, tapping the paper with a manicured finger, is the power of attorney they used to close the sale yesterday. I stared at the paper. It was a standard statutory form. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on the bottom of the second page. There, on the signature line, was a scrawl of blue ink. Lindsay Scott. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That is not my signature," I said. My voice was flat. "I know," Calvin said. "It is not even a good attempt. Look at the S in Scott. You loop yours at the bottom, this one loops at the top, and look at the pressure points. The pen dragged. Whoever signed this was hesitating." He flipped the page. "And this is the notary acknowledgement." I looked at the stamp. Jennifer L. Halloway, commissioned in the state of Nevada. Nevada. I looked at Calvin. "I have never been to Nevada. My parents have never been to Nevada. We are in Illinois." "It was a remote online notarization," Calvin explained, his voice tight with professional disgust. "It is legal in many states now. You upload your ID. You get on a webcam, and the notary verifies you. But here's the kicker. I ran a background check on Ms. Halloway. She has had her commission suspended twice for failure to properly verify identity. She is a rubber stamper. My guess is someone, likely your mother, uploaded a scan of your driver's license, which they probably took from your purse while visiting you, and got someone to impersonate you on a blurry webcam feed, or they just paid her off." I looked at the date stamp. It was dated January 29th, the day before my surgery. "They did this while I was prepping," I whispered. "They set this up while I was making freezer meals." "It gets worse," Calvin said. He pulled out another stack of papers. "The closing documents. They sold the unit for $425,000 to an investment group called Orchard Holdings. It was a cash deal. Fast close. The money was wired yesterday afternoon." "Can we reverse it?" I asked. "It is fraud. It is void. Right?" Calvin sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "In a perfect world, yes. But legally, it is a nightmare. Orchard Holdings is likely a good faith purchaser for value. That means they bought the property in good faith. Unaware of the fraud, if we sue to get the condo back, we are not just fighting your parents, we are fighting an investment firm with deep pockets. The litigation would take 3 to 5 years, and in the meantime, you would not have the condo, and you would be drowning in legal fees." I stared at the ceiling. 3 to 5 years. I would be 41 years old before I saw my home again. "So it is gone," I said. "The property is likely gone," Calvin admitted. "Unless you want to spend the next half-decade in court. But the money?" "The money is a different story." He leaned in, his voice dropping an octave. "Lindsay, what they did is not just a civil wrong. This is not a family dispute. This is a Class 2 felony, forgery, identity theft, wire fraud. If the amount is over $100,000, and it is, we are talking about mandatory prison time, not probation, prison." He looked me dead in the eye. "I need to know what you want to do. If I pick up this phone and call the district attorney, the police will be at the wedding venue within an hour. They will arrest your father. They will arrest your mother. It will be public. It will be messy." I thought about it. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I pictured the police cars rolling up to the Sterling Cove Resort. I pictured my father in handcuffs, looking small and confused. I pictured my mother screaming that it was all a misunderstanding. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. But then I thought about what would happen next. They would cry. They would play the victim. They would tell the world that their daughter was high on painkillers, that she was vindictive, that she had promised to help and then reneged. Kelsey would sob on TikTok about how her sister ruined her wedding because she was jealous. The narrative would get muddy. The truth would become a debate. I did not want a debate. I wanted an execution. "No," I said, opening my eyes. "No police. Not yet." Calvin looked surprised. "Lindsay, they stole nearly $500,000. "I know," I said. "But if we arrest them now, they have time to spin a story. They have 19 days until the wedding. If they are in jail, the wedding is canceled, and everyone feels sorry for them. Poor Harold and Diane, trying to help their daughter, and look what the ungrateful one did. No. I shifted in the bed, the pain acting as a clarifying agent for my thoughts. I want them to walk into that wedding thinking they are the kings of the world, I said. I want them to spend the money. I want them to stand in front of 200 guests and brag about how they made this happen. And then, when there is absolutely no way out, I want to drop the hammer. I looked at Calvin. I need you to do 3 things for me. Name them, he said, pulling out a notepad. First, I said, nail down the notary. Get the IP address of the computer that logged into the notarization session. Prove it was not me. Prove it came from my parents' house. Done, Calvin wrote. Subpoena is already drafted. Second, I said, trace the money. I want to know exactly where that $425,000 went. I want to know which account it hit, and I want to see every debit. If they bought a napkin, I want to know. We can get a forensic accounting order. Calvin nodded. What is the third? Silence, I said. You cannot tell anyone, not even your partners. As far as my parents know, I am just lying here in a drug-induced haze. If they call you, you do not know anything. We wait until the wedding. Calvin stopped writing. He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was respect, and maybe a little bit of fear. You are playing a dangerous game, Lindsay, he said. If the money gets spent, it might be hard to recover. I do not care about the money anymore, I lied. I did care, but I cared about my dignity more. I want my life back, and the only way to get it back is to burn their version of reality to the ground. Calvin nodded slowly. He closed the notepad. He began to pack up the folder. There is one more thing, he said. He didn't zip the bag. Instead, he reached into a side pocket and pulled out a single, thin document. It looked older than the others. The paper was slightly yellowed. When I was searching the county records for your condo deed, Calvin said, his voice hesitant, I ran a search for your name, just Lindsay Scott, to make sure there were no liens or judgments against you that might complicate the fraud case. And, I asked, and I found this. He handed me the paper. It was a copy of a property deed. Grantor, the estate of Margaret V. Halloway. Grantee, the Lindsay Scott Trust. Margaret. That was my grandmother. My mother's mother. She had died 6 years ago. She was a quiet woman who lived in the suburbs. The only person in the family who ever remembered my birthday without a Facebook reminder. I do not understand, I said, squinting at the text. What is the Lindsay Scott Trust? It is a trust set up in your name, Calvin said. It was established 6 years ago, likely upon your grandmother's death. According to this, she left you her house, the entire property, free and clear. I shook my head, confusion clouding the anger. No, that is impossible. Grandma left everything to Mom. Mom told me. She said there was no will, so it all went to next of kin. She said the house was sold to pay off Grandma's medical bills. Your mother lied, Calvin said simply. The words hung in the air. This deed was recorded 6 years ago. Calvin continued. The property was transferred into the trust, and you are the sole beneficiary of that trust. The trustee, the person managing it, is listed as Diane Scott. My mother? She has been controlling the trust, Calvin said. She probably had the mail sent to her address. She never told you. But I struggled to make the pieces fit. If I own the house, who bought it? Who lives there? Calvin looked at the document again. Nobody bought it. Lindsay. The title never changed hands after the trust took it. It is still owned by the trust. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. He turned it around to show me a Google Maps Street View image. Do you recognize this house? He asked. I looked at the image. It was a modest 2-story brick house with white shutters and a large oak tree in the front yard. There was a familiar silver sedan in the driveway. A wreath of fake peonies hung on the door. The same peonies my mother was obsessed with for the wedding. That is my parents' house, I said. That is where I grew up. Are you sure? Calvin asked. Yes, I said. They have lived there for 30 years. Then we have a very interesting situation, Calvin said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver down my spine, colder than the surgical steel in my back. Because according to the Registrar of Deeds, he said, tapping the paper on my tray table, your parents do not own that house. They lost ownership of their original home 10 years ago, the foreclosure you helped them with. It looks like they eventually had to sell it anyway, or refinanced it into oblivion. But this house, this is your grandmother's old house. They must have moved in after she died. He leaned closer. Lindsay, your parents are living in a house that belongs to you. They are living in your property, likely rent-free, while selling the only home you actually knew you had. I stared at the picture of the house. I saw the window of my old bedroom. I saw the porch where my father used to smoke cigars. I owned it. I had owned it for 6 years. While I was working 2 jobs to save for my condo, while I was eating ramen noodles, while I was stressing about mortgage payments, they were living in a fully paid-off house that belonged to me, and they had never said a word. She hid the will, I whispered. She made herself the trustee so she could hide the asset, move in, and pretend it was hers. That is my theory, Calvin said, and that is another felony, breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement from a trust. I looked up at Calvin. The pain in my body was gone. It had been replaced by a surge of adrenaline so pure it felt like electricity. They sold my condo, I said, my voice steady and hard. But they are sleeping in my house. Yes, Calvin said. They do not know I know. No one knows but us, Calvin said. I looked at the 92 missed calls on my phone. I looked at the voicemail icon. Calvin, I said, do not file the criminal charges yet. Just get the paperwork ready. For which crime? He asked. The fraud, the forgery. All of it, I said. I am going to evict them, but I'm going to do it when they are standing in the middle of the ballroom at the Sterling Cove Resort. I thought you might say that, Calvin said. He closed his briefcase. The click of the latch sounded like the cocking of a gun. 3 days later, Owen walked into my hospital room. He looked like he had aged 5 years in 48 hours. His suit was rumpled. His eyes were red-rimmed from the recycled air of a trans-Pacific flight, and he smelled like stale airport coffee and exhaustion. He had ignored my advice to stay in Tokyo. Of course he had. He dropped his bag by the door, walked over to the bed, and buried his face in the crook of my neck, careful not to jostle the brace that was currently holding my torso together. I am here, he whispered into my hair. I am here. I held him as best I could with my stiff arms. The relief was a physical weight lifting off my chest. But it was quickly replaced by the cold, hard reality of why he was here. We didn't have time for a tearful reunion. We had a war to plan. Did you call her? I asked, pulling back to look at him. She is in the cafeteria getting tea, Owen said, straightening up and rubbing his eyes. She will be up in 5 minutes. Calvin said she is the best probate litigator in the state. Marla Voss walked in exactly 5 minutes later. If Calvin Rowe was a shark in a 3-piece suit, Marla was a barracuda in a cashmere cardigan. She was a small woman, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair cut into a sharp bob and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She didn't carry a heavy leather briefcase. She carried a sleek tablet and a single, terrifyingly thin manila envelope. She pulled up a chair, looking from Owen to me with a gaze that was clinical yet oddly gentle. Mrs. Scott? She began, her voice soft but precise. Mr. Hartsfield, Calvin briefed me on the situation regarding the sale of your condominium. It is a mess, and I am sorry, but he asked me to look into the other matter. The matter of the Lindsay Scott Trust. I adjusted the incline of my bed, wincing as the movement pulled at the stitches in my back. Calvin said my grandmother left me a house. I never knew about it, Marla nodded. She opened the envelope and slid a document onto the rolling table. It was a copy of a last will and testament, dated 6 years ago. Margaret Halloway did not just leave you a house, Lindsay, Marla said. She left you everything, her entire estate. She bypassed your mother completely. I stared at the document. Why, the will includes a specific clause, Marla said, pointing to a paragraph on the second page. I will read it to my daughter. Diane, I leave my love and forgiveness, but no assets, as she has received her inheritance during my lifetime in the form of numerous bailouts and unpaid loans. To my granddaughter, Lindsay, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my real property, in the hopes that she will break the cycle. The air left the room. Break the cycle. Grandma knew, all those years. She had watched my parents drain their bank accounts, watched them manipulate me, watched them drown in their own bad decisions, and she had tried to give me a life raft. So why didn't I get it? I asked, my voice trembling. She died 6 years ago. I never got a letter. I never got a call from an executor. Because the executor was your mother, Marla said. Owen made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. Diane was the executor of the will that cut her out. It happens more often than you think, Marla explained, especially in families where boundaries are porous. Your mother filed the will. She established the trust as instructed, but she listed herself as the trustee, the manager of the assets, until you reach the age of 35, and for the beneficiary contact information. Marla swiped her finger across her tablet, turning the screen toward us. It showed a scanned form from the probate court. Beneficiary Lindsay Scott, address 1402, Oakwood Drive. That is my parents' address, I whispered. Exactly, Marla said. So every notification, every bank statement, every tax bill sent to the trust went to her mailbox, not yours. You turned 35 last year. Lindsay, the trust should have dissolved and the deed should have been transferred to you outright. But since you didn't know it existed, you didn't ask for it, and Diane certainly wasn't going to volunteer the information. I closed my eyes. It was so simple. It was so mundane. It wasn't a grand conspiracy involving hackers and offshore accounts. It was just my mother, checking the mail before anyone else got home, shredding the envelopes that had my name on them, and lying to my face for 6 years. Okay, I said, opening my eyes. So I own a house, the house my grandmother lived in. Where is it? That is the interesting part, Marla said. The house is located at 442 Briar Creek Lane. I nodded. I knew the house. I had spent my childhood summers there. It was a nice house. Solid. Brick. Better than the one I grew up in. And, Marla continued, tapping the screen again, according to the trust's financial records, which Calvin obtained through a court order this morning, the property is currently income generating. The trust employs a property management firm called Suburban Haven Rentals to manage a tenant. A tenant? Owen asked. Who is renting it? I have the lease agreement here, Marla said. She tapped a file. It is a standard 12-month lease, renewed annually for the last 5 years. The monthly rent is $2,200. The tenants are listed as... She paused, looking at me with a mix of pity and professional detachment. Harold and Diane Scott. The silence in the hospital room was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant beep of a heart monitor down the hall, the sound of my own breathing, it all amplified until it was deafening. My parents, I said slowly, trying to process the absurdity of the sentence. My parents are renting my house from me. Technically, they are renting it from the trust, Marla corrected. They pay the rent to the management company. The management company takes their 10% cut and deposits the remaining $1,980 into the trust's bank account. And who controls the trust's bank account? I asked. Diane, Marla said. I started to laugh. It hurt my ribs. It hurt my spine. But I couldn't stop. It was a dry, hacking laugh that sounded borderline hysterical. Do you see it, Owen? I gasped. Do you see the genius of it? Owen looked confused. I do not. Why would they pay rent to themselves? It makes no sense. They are losing the 10% fee to the management company. Protection, Marla said. She took off her glasses. I ran a credit check on your parents. They have judgments against them, credit card debt, an old business loan that went sideways. If they owned that house in their own names, their creditors could place a lien on it. They could force a sale to pay the debts. But if they are just tenants, if the house is owned by a trust, then the creditors cannot touch it, I finished. They are hiding their assets in my name. They are using my inheritance as a shield. And, Marla added, by paying rent, they create a paper trail that legitimizes their residency without ownership. Plus, since Diane controls the trust account, she essentially gets the money back. She writes a check for $2,200. It goes through the wash, and she gets $1,980 back a week later. It costs them a couple $100 a month to live in a $500,000 home and keep it safe from the bank. And to keep it safe from me, I said. Yes, Marla said, because if you knew you owned it, you might want to live in it, or sell it, or God forbid, collect the rent yourself. I looked out the window. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun setting on another day of my life that felt like a lie. I thought about the last 6 years. I thought about the time my car broke down and I didn't have the money to fix it. So I rode the bus for 3 weeks in the dead of winter. My mother knew I owned a house worth $500,000 then. I thought about the time Owen and I ate rice and beans for a month to pay off his student loans. My mother was living rent-free in my property, cycling money through an account with my name on it. I thought about the condo, my beautiful, hard-earned condo. They sold it because they needed liquid cash. They couldn't sell the house on Briar Creek Lane because they needed a place to live. And selling it would expose the trust. So they cannibalized my life to feed their lifestyle. They are living in my house, I said again, testing the weight of the words. They are sleeping in my bedroom. They are parking in my driveway. And they are legally your tenants, Marla said, which gives you a lot of power. Lindsay, as the beneficiary who has reached the age of distribution, you can petition to remove Diane as trustee immediately for breach of fiduciary duty. We can freeze the trust account, and as the new owner, you can choose not to renew their lease, or you can evict them for cause. Cause? Owen asked. What cause? Using the trust assets for self-dealing, Marla said. Fraud? Embezzlement? Take your pick. Owen stood up and paced the small room. He was vibrating with anger. We should do it now. We should serve them the papers today. Throw them out on the street before the wedding. No, I said. My voice was quiet. The laughter was gone. Lindsay, Owen pleaded. They have abused you for decades. They stole our home. They are squatting in your inheritance. Why do you want to wait? Because, I said, turning to look at him. If we evict them today, it is just a legal dispute. It is private. They can spin it. They can tell the family I am a monster who is kicking her elderly parents out of their home just because I am greedy. They will play the martyr card. Owen, they are masters at it. I winced as I shifted my legs. The numbness was fading, replaced by a prickly heat. I do not want to just win in court, I said. I want to dismantle the lie. I want everyone, Miles, his wealthy parents, the relatives who ignored me, the friends who think my parents are saints, to see exactly who they are. I looked at Marla. Can you get the deed transfer ready? I asked. Can you prepare a document that proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I am the owner of 442 Briar Creek Lane and that they are just tenants? I can have it certified and ready in 24 hours, Marla said. And the eviction notice, I asked. Can you draft a notice to quit? I can, Marla said. A small, grim smile played on her lips. I can date it for whenever you like. Date it for February 19th, I said. The day of the wedding, Owen said, realizing what I was doing. Exactly. I leaned back against the pillows. I was exhausted. My body felt like it was made of lead and broken glass, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. They want a show, I whispered. They spent $425,000 of my money to put on a show at the Sterling Cove Resort. They want to impress people. They want to look like the perfect, loving, generous family. I reached out and took Owen's hand. His grip was tight, his palm warm. The wedding isn't where I make a scene, Owen, I said. The wedding is where I turn on the lights. I am going to let them stand up there, in their tuxedos and their expensive gowns, and I am going to let them brag. And then, when they are at their highest point, when they think they have pulled it off. I looked at the folder Marla had brought. I am going to remind them that they are guests in my house. In every sense of the word. Marla stood up. She smoothed her skirt. I will work with Calvin. We will have the portfolio ready. You just focus on walking. Lindsay, you are going to need to stand up for this. I will stand, I promised. Even if it kills me. Marla left. Owen sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear for me. Are you sure you can do this? He asked softly. It is going to be nuclear. There is no coming back from this. You will lose them forever. Owen, I said, looking at the ceiling, counting the tiles again. 1, 2, 3, 4. I did not lose them today. I did not lose them when they sold the condo. I lost them 6 years ago, when my grandmother died trying to save me, and they buried her wish in a filing cabinet so they could keep using me. I squeezed his hand. I am not doing this for revenge, I said. I am doing it because Grandma Margaret left me a house so I could break the cycle, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. The morphine drip had been replaced by oral painkillers, and the fog in my brain had lifted just enough to reveal the sharp edges of my reality. I was sitting up in the hospital bed, a brace clamped tight around my torso like a rigid exoskeleton. Staring at my phone, it vibrated. The caller ID displayed a picture of a smiling blonde in a sun hat, Kelsey. I looked at Owen, who was sitting in the corner working on his laptop. He saw the screen and stiffened. Do not answer it, he said. I have to, I replied, my voice raspy but firm. I need to hear what she says. I need to know how deep she is in on this. I swiped green and put it on speaker. I did not say hello. I just let the silence stretch, heavy and accusatory. Lindsay, Kelsey's voice came through, high-pitched and trembling. It was her little sister voice, the one she used when she wanted to borrow my car or needed me to smooth things over with Dad. Lindsay, are you there? Mom is crying her eyes out. Is she? I asked. Why is she crying? Kelsey, is it because she committed a felony, or because she is afraid I might actually do something about it? Oh my God, stop being so dramatic, Kelsey snapped, the sweetness evaporating instantly. Nobody committed a felony. They sold a condo you were barely using because you are always at work anyway, and now you are making Mom feel like a criminal just because she wanted to help me. Help you, I repeated. They sold my home, Kelsey, $425,000, my equity, my safety net, to pay for your party. It is not a party, she shrieked. It is my wedding. It is the most important day of my life. You have been married for years. Lindsay, you had your day. Why can't you just be happy for me? Why does everything always have to be about you? The gaslighting was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. Kelsey, I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. Did you know? Know what? Did you know they were going to do it while I was in surgery? Did you know they were waiting for me to be unconscious? There was a pause, a beat of silence that told me everything I needed to know. I told them you would be difficult, she said, her voice dropping to a petulant mutter. I told them if they asked you, you would just say no like you always do. You are so stingy. Lindsay, you hoard everything, and honestly, you do not even need that place. You have Owen. You are married. What does a married woman need with a separate bachelor pad anyway? It is weird. The room went cold. Owen looked up from his computer. His jaw set in a hard line. There it was, the justification. In Kelsey's mind, and likely in my parents' minds, I ceased to be an individual the moment I got married. My assets became community property, and therefore family property. Since I had a husband to take care of me, my independence was just selfishness. So you suggested it, I said. You told them to sell it. I said we needed money, Kelsey corrected, defensive now. And I said you had an asset sitting there doing nothing. I did not tell them to forge anything. That was Dad's idea. But honestly, Lindsay, who cares? You are going to get the money back eventually. Like, when they die or something. Just consider it an early inheritance. I almost laughed. An early inheritance. If only she knew about the house on Briar Creek Lane. If only she knew that they were the ones living on my inheritance. Okay, Kelsey, I said. I get it now. So you will stop making Mom cry, she asked. Hopeful. You will tell the lawyer to back off, because seriously, Miles's parents are starting to ask questions about the venue deposit, and I do not need this stress right now. My skin is breaking out. I will handle it, I said. Good, she said. Love you. Linz, get well soon, but hurry up, because I need you at the rehearsal dinner. She hung up. I looked at Owen. She knew, I said. She orchestrated the timing. She is a sociopath, Owen said, closing his laptop with a snap. No, I said. She is just a product of the system, but she just made a mistake. What mistake? She thinks I'm going to be quiet. 2 hours later, the war moved from the telephone to the internet. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Kelsey Scott just posted a video. I opened the app. It was a storytime video. Filmed in her car. The classic influencer confession booth. The lighting was perfect, smoothing out her skin. She was wiping away a tear that looked suspiciously like it had been placed there with an eyedropper. Hey guys, she whispered into the camera. I did not want to come on here and do this, but I am so heartbroken right now. She took a shaky breath. You guys know my wedding is in 2 weeks. It has been my dream since I was a little girl. But well, I have a family member, I won't say who, because I am not about that drama. But let us just say she is older, and she is jealous. She has always been jealous of me. I watched, fascinated by the performance. My parents have sacrificed everything to help me with this wedding, Kelsey continued, looking bravely into the lens. They sold some property to help cover the costs because they are angels. And now this family member is threatening to sue them. She is threatening to put my elderly parents in jail over money. Money? Can you imagine loving money more than your own family? She sniffed. I do not know if I can do this. I feel so attacked. Please send good vibes. And if anyone knows a good lawyer who works for free for victims of family harassment, let me know. The video ended. I scrolled down to the comments. Oh my God. Stay strong, babe. Your sister sounds toxic. Cut her off. Then came the family. My Aunt Linda. We are praying for you. Kelsey. Shame on her. Money is the root of all evil. My cousin Brad. Unbelievable. After everything your parents did for her. She should be ashamed. My mother. Diane Scott. We love you. Honey, don't let the negativity ruin your light. God will provide. Owen was reading over my shoulder. His hands were shaking. I am going to comment, he said, reaching for his own phone. I am going to destroy them. I am going to post the voicemail from your dad. No, I said, grabbing his wrist. Lindsay, they are slaughtering you. They are turning you into a villain in front of everyone we know. Let them, I said. Let them talk. Let them type. Why? Because every word they type is evidence, I said. Every lie they tell on a public platform proves malice. If we correct them now, they will delete the posts. They will hide. I want them to feel safe. I want them to think they have won the narrative. I opened my Photos app. I started screenshotting. I captured the video. I captured the comments. I captured the timestamps. I created a folder named The Wedding. We are not going to fight them in the comments section. Owen, I said, my voice cold. We are going to fight them in a deposition. The next day, Kelsey's need for attention and money gave us the smoking gun we didn't even know we needed, emboldened by the sympathy she was getting online. and likely realizing that the $425,000 was burning up faster than she expected. Kelsey launched a crowdfunding campaign. It popped up on my feed, "Help Save Kelsey's Dream Wedding, Family Crisis Fund." The description was a work of fiction that would have impressed a novelist. She claimed that unexpected legal fees, caused by an estranged relative, were draining the wedding budget. She was asking for $10,000 to cover the shortfall, but Kelsey was not detail-oriented. That was my job. Kelsey was sloppy. In an effort to prove that the wedding costs were real, she had uploaded a series of screenshots showing invoices and bank transfers. She had redacted most of the account numbers with a black marker tool on her phone, but she had missed one. In the third image, a screenshot of a bank transfer to Sterling Cove Events. The source account was visible at the bottom. It was a checking account ending in 4492. I recognized that number. It was my parents' main joint checking account. I knew it because I had deposited money into it 10 years ago during the foreclosure crisis. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the balance shown in the screenshot. Available balance $385,400. I did the math. The condo sold for $425,000. After closing costs, agent fees, and the payoffs for the minor liens my parents likely had, the net would be somewhere around $390,000. This screenshot proved that the money from the condo sale had gone directly into my parents' personal checking account, and from there was being funneled directly to the wedding venue. It proved the money trail in a single image. I screenshotted it, then I zoomed in, highlighted the account number and the balance, and sent it to Calvin Rowe. Got them. I typed. 10 minutes later, Kelsey must have realized her mistake, or someone warned her, because the campaign was taken down. But it was too late. The internet is written in ink. That afternoon, Marla Voss arrived at the hospital. She looked pleased. "We have made progress on the trust," she said, setting her briefcase down. I subpoenaed the change of address forms from the post office. She handed me a photocopy. It was a standard USPS form, dated 6 years ago. Moving from 442 Briar Creek Lane, moving to 1402 Oakwood Drive. But it wasn't just a move, it was a redirection of mail for a specific recipient. Recipient, the Lindsay Scott Trust. "Look at the signature," Marla said. "It was my mother's signature. Authentic, not forged." "But here is the catch," Marla said, pointing to a small checkbox at the bottom. "This box here asks if the person signing has the authority to redirect mail for the recipient." She checked yes, but beneath that, there is a section for reason. She wrote, "Recipient is incapacitated." I stared at the word, incapacitated. "She told the federal government I was incapacitated," I said, "to steal my mail." "Mail fraud," Marla said. "Federal crime, and it proves that hiding the house from you wasn't an accident or an oversight. It was a calculated, active effort to deceive. This piece of paper alone is enough to strip her of her role as trustee and potentially put her in federal prison for 5 years." I felt a strange sense of calm. The pieces were falling into place. They weren't just bad parents. They were criminals, and they were sloppy criminals. "I need to prepare a statement," I said. "Not for now. For later." I called Sarah, a friend of mine from Redfield Meridian. Sarah worked in crisis PR. She was the one the company called when a server farm caught fire or a CEO said something stupid on Twitter. "Lindsay," Sarah asked when she picked up, "I heard you were in surgery. Are you okay?" "I am fine," I said, "but I need a favor, a professional favor. I need you to help me draft a press release, or rather, a personal statement that reads like a press release." "Okay." Sarah sounded intrigued. "What is the topic?" "Financial fraud and identity theft within a family structure." I said, "I need it to be short. I need it to be factual. No emotion. Just the timeline, the crimes, and the outcome." "Who is the audience?" Sarah asked. "Everyone," I said. "The guests at a wedding, the internet, the world." "Got it," Sarah said. Her tone shifted to professional mode. "Send me the bullet points. We will make it bulletproof. When is this going live? February 19th, I said. In the evening. Copy that. Just as I hung up with Sarah, Calvin called. Lindsay, he said, I have news on the money. Did you find it? Yes, thanks to that screenshot you sent, and the forensic accounting order. We have tracked it. They have been busy. They paid off 2 credit cards. They bought a new car, a Lexus. Looks like they transferred $10,000 to Kelsey, but the bulk of it, about $150,000, is sitting in an escrow account for the Sterling Cove Resort. The wedding venue, I said. Correct. It is a deposit. And I checked the venue's contract terms. They have a strict fraud and illicit funds clause. If the funds used to pay for the event are proven to be proceeds of a crime, the venue is required to freeze the event and hold the funds for law enforcement. So we can stop the wedding, I said. Right now, we can call the venue, send them the police report, and they will cancel the event. We could, Calvin said. If I make that call today, the wedding is off, the money gets frozen, your parents get a call from the venue manager telling them the party is over. I looked at the calendar on the wall. 12 days left. If I stopped it now, it would be a mercy. It would save them the humiliation of the wedding day reveal. It would save the guests the travel time, but they didn't show me mercy. They sold my home while I was cut open. They called me incapacitated to steal my inheritance. They shamed me on the internet. No, I said. Lindsay, Calvin warned. If they spend the rest of that money, let the venue keep the deposit for now, I said. Do not call them yet. I want the event to happen. I want the guests to be seated. I want the appetizers to be served. You want to maximize the damage, Calvin said. It wasn't a question. I want to maximize the truth, I corrected. If I cancel it now, they will lie about why. They will blame me. But if I wait until they are standing there, raising a glass of champagne bought with my money, then there is no lie they can tell that will save them. It is your call, Calvin said. I will keep the paperwork ready, but Lindsay, you are playing chicken with a lot of money. It is not about the money anymore, Calvin, I said, looking at the screenshot of Kelsey's crying face on my phone. It is about the price of admission. I hung up. I looked at Owen. Pack your bag, I said. We are going to rehab. I need to learn how to walk in heels in 10 days. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Alabaster Room, a private dining space in downtown Chicago that charged $40 for a plate of asparagus. The room was draped in heavy velvet curtains and smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck. It was the kind of place designed to make you feel underdressed. No matter what you were wearing. I arrived 18 minutes late. I was wearing a loose silk dress that hid the rigid plastic brace encasing my torso from hips to armpits. I had traded my hospital socks for flat, sensible shoes. But I still needed a cane. It was a sleek black carbon fiber cane that Owen had bought for me. He walked beside me, his hand hovering near my elbow, ready to catch me if the ground, or my family, decided to shift. The head waiter opened the double mahogany doors. The conversation inside didn't just stop. It died. 30 heads turned. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The silence was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. They weren't expecting me. Kelsey had told everyone I was too fragile to come. My mother had probably told them I was sulking. I didn't smile. I didn't apologize. I just walked. The sound echoed off the hardwood floors, a rhythmic announcement of my survival. I saw my Aunt Renee's eyes widen. I saw my cousin Brad look down at his plate. I saw the groom's parents, the Lockwoods, exchange a confused glance, and then I saw them. My parents were sitting at the head table, flanking Kelsey and Miles. My father, Harold, was mid-laugh, a glass of red wine in his hand. The laugh froze on his face, contorting into a grimace that looked like he had swallowed a lemon. My mother, Diane, went pale beneath her layers of foundation. Lindsay, Diane said, standing up. Her voice was too loud, too bright. It was the voice of a woman trying to direct traffic away from a car crash. We didn't think you could make it. Kelsey said the doctor ordered strict bed rest. The doctor said I needed to start moving, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. And I wouldn't miss this. It is a celebration of family. Isn't it? I reached the table. Diane moved to hug me, but I stiffened, using the cane as a subtle barrier. She stopped, her hands hovering awkwardly in the air, then patted my arm with a touch as cold as dry ice. "Well, you look sturdy," she said, her eyes flicking to the cane. "Find a seat. We were just starting the toasts." Owen pulled out a chair for me at the far end of the table, next to Miles's teenage cousin who was busy scrolling on TikTok. I sat down slowly, the brace digging into my ribs. The pain was there, a dull, throbbing companion, but it was nothing compared to the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Harold cleared his throat. He tapped his spoon against his wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. "As I was saying," he boomed, regaining his composure. He was a salesman at heart. He knew how to recover a room. This wedding, it is not just about two young people in love. It is about two families coming together. It is about sacrifice. It is about doing whatever it takes to support the ones we love. He raised his glass higher, his eyes scanning the room but carefully avoiding mine. "Diane and I, we have always believed that our children come first. We have had our struggles. Sure, but when Kelsey came to us with her dream, we knew we had to make it happen. We dug deep. We moved mountains." He paused for effect. "And we are so proud to welcome Miles into our fold. To family. To family." The room echoed. I raised my water glass. I didn't drink. I just watched him. Then, Harold made a mistake. He got arrogant. "And let us not forget Lindsay," he added, gesturing vaguely in my direction. She has had a tough week, but she is here, and in her own way. She has been a part of making this happen too, a silent partner. You could say," he chuckled. A few people laughed nervously. My mother kicked him under the table. I saw the tablecloth move. I locked eyes with Harold. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just stared at him with the cold, flat gaze of a creditor. His smile faltered. He looked away. Taking a large gulp of wine, dinner was served. The conversation resumed. A low hum of gossip and polite networking. I picked at my salmon. I wasn't hungry. I was feeding on something else. Miles Lockwood. The groom stood up to circulate. Miles was 30, an architect with a sharp jawline and eyes that were usually kind but currently looked tired. He worked his way down the table, shaking hands, laughing at bad jokes. When he reached me, he stopped. "Lindsay," he said, "I'm glad you came. Honestly, Kelsey said you were well. She said you were pretty out of it." "I am very lucid." "Miles," I said. He looked at me, really looked at me. He noticed the cane. He noticed the way I sat, straight as a board because I couldn't bend. He noticed the lack of warmth in my eyes when I looked at my parents. "Is everything okay?" he asked, lowering his voice. "I mean, with the family." "The last few weeks, things have felt weird. Your dad insisted on paying the venue deposit in cash, well, a wire transfer, but from a new account, and Kelsey has been intense. Miles wasn't stupid. He came from money, but he was the kind of person who actually read contracts. He knew that people who suddenly had large sums of cash usually had a story to go with it." "Miles," I said softly, "you love her, right?" "Yeah," he said, "I do." "And you trust my parents?" He hesitated. "They have been generous, very generous." I leaned in as much as the brace would allow. "Miles," I whispered, "do you know where that generosity came from? Are you sure you know where the money for this wedding actually came from?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Harold said he closed a big deal. Some commercial property sale." "Ask him which property," I said. Miles stared at me. The color drained slightly from his face. "Lindsay, what are you saying?" Before I could answer, a hand clamped onto Miles's arm. "Babe," Kelsey chirped, appearing out of nowhere like a heat-seeking missile in white chiffon. "Come on, Mom wants a picture of us by the cake table." The lighting is perfect right now. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing into slits. Hi, Lindsay. Enjoying the fish. It is $40 a plate, so try to finish it. She yanked Miles away, but as he walked off, he looked back at me. The doubt was there. The seed had been planted. I reached into my purse. Kelsey, I called out. She stopped, annoyed. What? I have something for you, I said. Since I might not be able to stand for the gift exchange later, I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. It looked elegant. It looked expensive. Inside was not a check. Inside was a copy of the notice to quit, the eviction notice for 442 Briar Creek Lane, and a copy of the forensic accounting report showing the transfer of my condo funds to her wedding venue. What is it? She asked, eyeing it greedily. She probably thought it was a check. She probably thought I had caved. It is a surprise, I said, handing it to her. Do not open it now. Open it on the morning of the wedding. When you are getting ready, it is something old and something new. Ooh, she said, her mood instantly brightening. She tucked the envelope into her clutch. Thanks, Linz. I knew you would come through. She walked away, clutching the grenade that would blow up her life. While the dessert was being served, Owen slipped away. He texted me. Going to the car. Meeting C. Calvin Rowe was waiting in the parking lot, sitting in his sedan with the engine running. I couldn't go out there. It would look suspicious. So Owen was my proxy. 10 minutes later, Owen returned. He slid into the seat beside me. He smelled like cold air and tobacco smoke Calvin smoked when he was nervous. It is set, Owen whispered, pretending to cut a piece of cheesecake. Calvin has the timeline. We are going to drop the notary evidence first, the forgery. That undermines their legal standing. Then, once they try to deny it, we drop the trust documents, the house. That undermines their moral standing. And the money, I asked. The money is the kill shot, Owen said. We save the bank statements for the very end, when they say they did it for love. We show the receipts that prove they did it for greed. I nodded. It was a good plan. It was ruthless. The dinner wound down. Harold made another speech, slurring his words slightly. Diane preened. Kelsey accepted compliments on her glow. I watched them all. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. They looked so happy. They looked so secure. They had no idea that the woman sitting at the end of the table, the one they thought was broken and defeated, was holding the detonator. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed. I expected a text from Calvin, or maybe a get home safe from a friend. It was a number I didn't recognize. Area code 312. Chicago? I opened the message. There was no text at first, just an image. It was a photo taken at night. Flash on. It showed a front door. A door with a wreath of fake peonies. It was the door to 442 Briar Creek Lane. My house, my parents' house. Then the text bubble appeared below it. If you show up at the wedding, you will lose the other one too. We know about the trust. We know everything. Stay home, Lindsay, or the house burns. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The cane clicked on the concrete. Lindsay, Owen asked, stopping beside me. What is wrong? I stared at the screen. The threat was crude. It was desperate, but it was specific. We know about the trust. My parents knew I knew. They must have found out. Maybe the management company tipped them off. Maybe Marla's inquiries raised a flag. They were threatening arson. They were threatening to burn down my inheritance rather than let me take it. I looked at Owen. I showed him the phone. His face went hard. We are calling the police. Now. No, I said. I typed a reply. Burn it. I have insurance. See you at the altar. I hit send. Lindsay, Owen said. His voice panicked. They are crazy. They will actually do it. Let them, I said, walking toward the car. If they burn it down, they go to prison for arson instead of fraud. Either way, I win. I got into the car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a terrifying realization. I didn't care if the house burned. I didn't care about the bricks. I didn't care about the timber. I just wanted to see the look on their faces when the fire they started consumed them. The Sterling Cove resort smelled of sea salt, expensive perfume, and $425,000 of stolen money. It was a perfect day for a wedding. The sky was a painfully bright blue, scrubbed clean of clouds. The ocean glittered in the background, a relentless, churning expanse that didn't care about the fraud taking place on its shores. The lawn where the ceremony was to be held had been transformed into a cathedral of white. There were thousands of white roses, white hydrangeas, white orchids imported from Thailand. There were crystal chandeliers suspended from arbor trellises, catching the sunlight and throwing rainbows across the grass. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. It was a crime scene disguised as a fairy tale. I walked onto the grass, my cane sinking slightly into the manicured turf. Owen was on my left, his hand warm on my elbow. On my right was my Aunt Renee. Renee was my mother's older sister. She was 70 years old, wore sensible shoes, and had a face carved from granite. She was the only person in the family who had refused to sign the "Get Well Soon" card my mother had circulated. Because she knew exactly why I was in the hospital, Renee had been there when Grandma Margaret died. She had been the one who whispered to me at the funeral, "Your mother is a vulture. Lindsay, watch your pockets." I hadn't listened then. I was listening now. "Look at this," Renee muttered, adjusting her glasses as she scanned the lavish setup. "Crystal stemware for an outdoor ceremony. That is $5 a glass rental fee. Diane always did have champagne taste on a stolen beer budget." "It is not beer money this time, Renee," I said softly. "It is my condo." "I know," Renee said, her grip tightening on her purse. Inside that purse was a copy of the deed to the house on Briar Creek Lane. She was my backup. If I went down, if they dragged me out, Renee would be the one to hand the papers to the groom's father. We made our way to the seating chart. It was a massive slab of acrylic with names etched in gold calligraphy. I ran my finger down the list. The head tables were for the immediate family. The bridal party, the VIPs. I found my name. Table 22. 22, Owen asked, looking around. "Where is that?" "We found it. It was in the back. The very back." It was next to the catering tent and the portable restrooms brought in for the staff. It was the fringe table. The table for distant cousins, college roommates who had drifted away, and the obligatory invites who weren't supposed to actually show up. "Classy," Owen said, pulling out a chair for me. "It is a power move," I said, sitting down stiffly. My back was throbbing, a deep, rhythmic ache that synced with my heartbeat. "They put me here so I cannot cause a scene. They think if I am far enough away, I am irrelevant." I looked across the sea of white chairs. I saw heads turning. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. I saw a woman I recognized, one of Kelsey's bridesmaids, point a manicured finger in my direction. She leaned over to the girl next to her, covering her mouth with a fan, but her eyes never left me. I knew what they were saying. "That is the sister. The one who tried to ruin the wedding, the jealous one. Did you see the video Kelsey posted? Poor Kelsey." I adjusted my silk shawl to cover the rigid line of my back brace. I didn't hide. I lifted my chin. I met their stares. One by one. They looked away. They couldn't hold my gaze. People who feed on gossip crumble when they are met with silence. The string quartet began to play. It was Pachelbel's Canon, of course. The ceremony began. Kelsey walked down the aisle. I had to admit, she looked stunning. Her dress was a Vera Wang custom job, probably $20,000. That was my kitchen renovation walking down the aisle. That was the trip to Italy I never took. She looked angelic. She was crying. Real tears. Fake tears. With Kelsey. The line had blurred years ago. She probably believed her own performance. She probably believed she was the princess and I was the dragon. My father walked her down the aisle. Harold looked distinguished in his tuxedo. He was beaming. He looked like a man who had pulled off the deal of the century. He handed her off to Miles, patted him on the back, and took his seat in the front row, wiping a tear from his eye. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. It wasn't jealousy, it was revulsion. It was the physical sickness of watching a predator pretend to be a protector. The officiant began to speak. He talked about love. He talked about trust. He talked about building a foundation that would last a lifetime. Love does not envy, he intoned. Love does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. Owen squeezed my hand so hard his knuckles turned white. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Every word the officiant spoke was an indictment of the people paying him. Then came the moment, the archaic, dramatic pause that everyone waits for. If anyone here present knows of any just cause why these two may not be lawfully joined in marriage, the officiant said, looking out over the crowd. Speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy, and then, heads turned. It wasn't subtle. A dozen people, mostly from my side of the family, turned in their seats to look at table 22. They looked at me. They were waiting for it. They were waiting for the jealous sister to stand up and scream. They were waiting for the scene Kelsey had primed them to expect. My mother, sitting in the front row, didn't turn around. Her shoulders went rigid. She was terrified. I sat perfectly still. I looked at the back of my mother's head. Not yet. I thought, not here. This is too easy. I smiled. A small, serene smile. I looked at the officiant and nodded slightly, as if to say, proceed. The tension broke. The guests turned back around. Disappointed. They wanted a reality show, and I had given them a boring guest. Then by the power vested in me, they were married. The crowd erupted in applause. Bubbles filled the air. Kelsey and Miles walked back up the aisle. Beaming, as they passed table 22, Kelsey didn't look at me, but Miles did. He looked at me for a split second, and his smile faltered. He looked at the envelope in Kelsey's hand. She was still clutching her bouquet, but I knew the envelope was somewhere close. We moved to the reception tent. It was a massive structure with silk-draped ceilings and chandeliers the size of small cars. Where is he? I whispered to Owen. Table 5. Owen said. He got upgraded. I looked over. Calvin Rowe was sitting at table 5, near the bar. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him like armor. He didn't look like a wedding guest. He looked like a Fed. He had a glass of scotch in front of him. Untouched, and on the floor, leaning against his leg, was his leather briefcase. He caught my eye. He gave a barely perceptible nod. He was ready. We sat down at our exile table. The appetizers arrived. Seared scallops with truffle foam. $40 a plate. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out under the table. It was a text from Calvin. Update from property management. Someone tried to call a locksmith to 442 Briar Creek Lane an hour ago. Claimed they were the owner and had lost their keys. The locksmith called the management firm for authorization because the name on the request, Diane Scott, did not match the owner of record. I stared at the screen. They had tried to change the locks. The text message from last night, stay home or the house burns, had been a bluff. Or at least, Plan B. Plan A was to lock me out of my own inheritance before I could claim it. They wanted to secure the fortress. Did they get in? I typed back. No, Calvin replied. Management denied authorization. Locksmith left. They are panicked. Lindsay, they know the walls are closing in. I put the phone away. They were here, at this wedding, smiling and drinking champagne, knowing that an hour ago they had failed to seize the backup asset. They were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. The dinner service began. The wine flowed. The noise level rose. It was a perfect party. The band was playing jazz standards. The cake was 5 tiers high. Then the speeches began. The best man told a drunk, rambling story about a college road trip. The maid of honor cried through a poem she had written, and then Harold stood up. My father took the microphone. He looked flushed. He had been drinking steadily since the ceremony. The near miss with the locksmith and the stress of the stolen money were probably weighing on him. and he was medicating with expensive Cabernet. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed, his voice amplified by the massive speakers. "What a night! What a night!" Applause. "You know," Harold said, swaying slightly, "raising 2 daughters, it is not easy. It is expensive." Laughter. "But you do it because you love them. You do it because you want them to have the best." When Kelsey told me she wanted this venue, I said, "Honey, it is a lot." But then I looked at her, and I said, "For you, anything." He looked at Kelsey, who blew him a kiss. "And we have had a lot of help," Harold continued. "Family pulls together. That is what Scots do. We sacrifice for each other." He paused. His eyes scanned the room. They landed on table 22. Why did he do it? Was it the alcohol? Was it arrogance? Or was it a twisted need to force me to be complicit in his lie? Did he think that if he dragged me into the spotlight, I would be forced to play the role of the dutiful daughter to save face? "You know," Harold said, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. "Speaking of family, I think we should hear from the big sister. She has been quiet tonight, but she is the one who made a very generous contribution to get us here." The room went quiet. "Lindsay," Harold called out, gesturing with his wineglass, "come on up here. Say a few words for your sister. Tell everyone how happy you are for her." My mother froze. She grabbed his arm, whispering something frantic, but he shook her off. He was flying high on his own narrative. He thought he owned me. He thought the $425,000 he had stolen had bought my silence. Owen stiffened beside me. "Do not go," he whispered. "It is a trap." "No," I said, reaching for my cane. "It is an invitation." I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was loud in the silent tent. I adjusted my brace. I gripped the cane. I began to walk. It was a long walk from table 22 to the stage. I had to pass 20 tables, 200 people. I walked slowly. Click, step, click, step. Every eye in the room was on me. I saw Miles looking at me with dread. I saw Kelsey looking at me with a mixture of triumph and suspicion. I saw my mother looking at me with pure terror. She knew, in that moment. Watching me walk. She knew. She saw the lack of fear in my eyes. She saw the way I held my head. She realized, too late, that she hadn't broken me. She had just sharpened me. I reached the dance floor. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The pain in my back was a scream of white-hot agony. But I pushed it down. I would not limp. I would not falter. Harold smiled at me, holding out the microphone. His eyes were glassy. "There she is, the silent partner." I took the microphone from his hand. It was heavy. It was cold. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the wealthy relatives. I saw the business partners. I saw the friends who thought my parents were saints. I looked at Calvin Rowe at table 5. He had opened his briefcase. He was holding a thick stack of documents in his hand, resting them on the tablecloth. He nodded once. I looked at Kelsey. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting back and forth. I looked at my parents, standing there in their finery, living in my house, spending my money, demanding my gratitude. I brought the microphone to my lips. "Thank you, Dad," I said. My voice was clear. It didn't shake. It was the voice of a woman who had spent 10 years managing chaos, and who was now about to unleash it. "He is right," I said to the crowd. "I have been quiet. I have been very quiet for a long time." I paused. The silence was electric. "My father mentioned sacrifice," I continued. "He mentioned that family pulls together, and he mentioned a contribution." I turned to look directly at Harold. He was still smiling, but the corners of his mouth were twitching. "I think it is important," I said, turning back to the guests, "that everyone here knows exactly what that contribution was. Because when you see a wedding this beautiful, this perfect, you should know the price tag." I took a breath. "And you should know who actually paid it." I saw my mother stand up. "Lindsay," she warned, her voice strident. I ignored her. "My parents sold my home," I said. The smile dropped from Harold's face. While I was in surgery, I continued, my voice rising just enough to cut through the sudden gasp in the room. While I was unconscious, they forged my signature. They stole $425,000, and they used it to pay for the flowers you are smelling right now. The room exploded. The silence that followed my statement was not the respectful silence of a church. It was the vacuum of a room where the air had suddenly been sucked out. A fork clattered onto a china plate somewhere near table 12, and the sound cracked like a gunshot. Harold stood frozen. His hand was still extended, halfway to where the microphone had been, his mouth slightly open, his face draining of the ruddy flush of alcohol and replaced by a waxen, sickly gray. Diane had collapsed back into her chair, her hand clutching her chest, her eyes wide and fixed on me with the terror of a woman watching a tsunami crest over the horizon. I did not retreat. I did not apologize. I stood center stage, the lights hot on my face, the pain in my fused spine acting as a steel rod keeping me upright. I looked at the 200 guests, the friends, the extended family, the business associates, the wealthy parents of the groom. I am sorry to interrupt the dinner service, I said. My voice was calm. It was terrifyingly conversational. But my father insisted I speak about my contribution, and since truth is the foundation of any good marriage, I think we should start there. I reached into the small silk clutch I had carried on my wrist. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not a speech. It was a photocopy. On January 30th, I said, holding the paper up, I underwent spinal fusion surgery. It was a 10-hour procedure. I was under general anesthesia. I was incapacitated. I turned slightly to look at the groom's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lockwood, who were sitting at table 1. They were staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. While I was unconscious, I continued, my parents, Harold and Diane Scott, accessed a safe in my home. They took the deed to my condominium. They took a power of attorney form, and they forged my signature. That is a lie, Harold shouted. His voice cracked. He lunged forward, trying to grab the microphone stand. She is on drugs. She is high on painkillers. Cut the mic. Owen was there before Harold could take 2 steps. My husband moved with a speed I had never seen before. He stepped between my father and the stage, placing a firm hand on Harold's chest. Let her speak, Harold, Owen said. His voice was low, but in the silent room, it carried to the back wall. You have had the floor all night. It is Lindsay's turn. Harold struggled for a second, looking around for support. He looked at his brothers. He looked at his friends, but nobody moved to help him. They were paralyzed by the accusation. I turned back to the crowd. This is a copy of the power of attorney, I said, waving the paper. It is dated January 29th. The signature is a forgery. The notary who stamped it has already been subpoenaed, and the $425,000 realized from that sale. I looked down at Kelsey. She was sitting at the head table, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. It was wired to an account controlled by my mother, I said. And from there, $150,000 was wired to the Sterling Cove Resort to pay for this room, this food, and that band. I pointed to the jazz quartet. The bass player stopped playing immediately, looking terrified. Liar, Diane shrieked from the front row. She stood up, knocking her chair over. We did it for you. We were managing your assets. You are ungrateful after everything we did. Managing my assets, I asked. By selling my home and buying a wedding. I looked toward table 5. Calvin, I said. Calvin Rowe stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the stage. He moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a tank. The crowd parted for him. He stepped up onto the riser next to me. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need to. He projected his voice like the courtroom veteran he was. My name is Calvin Rowe, he announced. I am a senior partner at Rowe, Ellis, and Mercer. I am Mrs. Scott's attorney. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. I have here a sworn affidavit from the notary public admitting to the fraudulent verification of the signature, Calvin said. I have the forensic accounting records tracing the wire transfers from the sale of Lindsay Scott's property directly to the accounts of Harold and Diane Scott, and subsequently to the vendors present here tonight. He looked at the Lockwoods. This is not a family dispute, Calvin stated legally. This is Class 2 felony forgery, wire fraud, and grand larceny. We are filing charges on Monday morning, but given that the funds paying for this event are proceeds of a crime, I felt it was my duty to inform the other parties involved. The room erupted into chaos. It wasn't loud cheering. It was a low, frantic rumble of hundreds of people whispering at once. Waiters stopped serving. The venue manager appeared at the side of the room, looking frantic on a walkie-talkie. Miles Lockwood stood up. The groom looked like he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Calvin. He looked at me. And then he turned slowly to look at his new wife. Kelsey, Miles said. His voice was shaking. Kelsey, look at me. Kelsey refused to look at him. She was staring at the tablecloth, shredding a napkin with her manicured nails. Did you know? Miles asked. It is not like that, Kelsey whispered. But the microphone on the head table picked it up. They said she wouldn't mind. They said she had plenty of money. Did you know? Miles roared. The sound tore through the room, silencing the whispers. We needed the venue, Kelsey screamed back. Finally snapping, she looked up, her face twisted and ugly with entitlement. You wanted the Sterling Cove. Your parents expected it. What was I supposed to do? Let us get married in a barn. Lindsay has a job. She has insurance. She can get another condo. We are family. The confession hung in the air, gross and undeniable. Miles recoiled physically. He took a step back from her, as if she were contagious. You stole her house, Miles said, his voice full of revulsion. You let me stand here and thank your parents for their generosity. And you knew the whole time they had robbed your sister while she was in the hospital. He turned to his parents. Dad, Miles said. Mr. Lockwood, a man who ran a hedge fund and knew exactly what fraud looked like, was already on his phone. He stood up, his face grim. I am on with our general counsel, Mr. Lockwood said, his voice cutting through the tension. Do not say another word, Miles, not one word. He looked at Harold. Harold. Mr. Lockwood said, we are going to need to have a very serious conversation, and I suggest you do not leave this room. Harold was sweating profusely now. He looked trapped. The illusion he had built, the benevolent patriarch, the successful businessman, had evaporated. He was just a thief in a rented tuxedo. Now, wait a minute, Harold stammered, holding up his hands. This is a misunderstanding. Lindsay agreed to this. She is jealous. She is trying to ruin Kelsey's day because she is miserable. He turned to me, his eyes bulging. You spiteful little witch, he hissed, forgetting the microphone was still in my hand. You couldn't just let her have this. You had to humiliate us. You have your condo back. I will pay you back. I was going to pay you back. With what money? Dad, I asked into the mic. With the money from the next thing you stole. I am your father, he shouted. I gave you life you owe me. You owe us everything. I owe you nothing, I said. I paid my debts. I paid them when I saved your house 10 years ago. I paid them when I bought my own way through life while you handed everything to Kelsey. And I paid them today, when you took everything I had built. I looked at Diane. She was crying now, the ugly, sobbing tears of a woman who realizes her manipulation has finally hit a wall it cannot climb. Lindsay, please, she wailed. We are family. Don't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No pity. No sadness. Just a cold, crystalline clarity. I am not doing this. Mom, I said. You did this. You signed the papers. You spent the money. I signaled to Calvin. He closed the file on the podium with a sharp snap. The police are not here yet. I said to the room. I decided to give you the courtesy of finishing your meal, but the venue has been notified. The funds are frozen, and I suspect this party is over. I started to turn away. I had dropped the bomb. I had exposed the crime. I had watched Miles look at my sister with disgust. It should have been enough, but it wasn't enough, because they still had one thing left. They still had their dignity as homeowners. They still had the safety of the house on Briar Creek Lane. They still thought that, worst-case scenario, they could retreat to their fortress and play the victim from the comfort of my grandmother's legacy. I stopped. I turned back to the microphone. The room was watching me. They thought I was done. They thought the show was over. "Oh," I said, "there is one more thing." I looked directly at my parents. Harold was wiping his forehead with a napkin. Diane was clutching Kelsey's hand. "You keep saying I should be grateful," I said. "You keep saying that everything you do is for the family. You keep acting like you are the providers." I leaned in close to the mic. "That $425,000, I said softly. "That was the condo. That was the asset I knew about. That was the one you thought you could steal because you thought it was all I had." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the second envelope. The one Marla Voss had given me. The one containing the deed to 442 Briar Creek Lane and the eviction notice. "But in your haste to rob me," I said, "you forgot something important. You forgot that Grandma Margaret didn't trust you." Harold's head snapped up. Diane went rigid, her mouth falling open. "You forgot," I continued, "that when you hide a will and when you create a trust to hide assets from your creditors, you create a paper trail." I saw the recognition in Diane's eyes, the absolute, unadulterated panic. She shook her head frantically, mouthing, "No, no, no." "What is she talking about?" Miles asked, looking from me to his new in-laws. "I am talking about the house you live in, Dad," I said. "The house at 442 Briar Creek Lane. The house you tell everyone you own. The house where you raised Kelsey." I held up the deed. "You don't own it," I said. "You never owned it." "Lindsay, stop," Diane screamed. It was a primal shriek. "Stop it right now." "Grandma left it to me," I said, my voice overriding hers. "She left it to me in a trust 6 years ago. You hid the will. You made yourself the trustee so you could live there rent-free while I paid for my own apartment. You have been living in my house, sleeping in my rooms, and pretending to be the lords of the manor." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "So I have a question for you," I said, looking my father dead in the eye. "And I want you to answer it in front of all these people you tried so hard to impress." I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "You just sold my condo to pay for this party," I said. "So tell me when the police come to take you away tonight, and when you eventually get out, where exactly do you think you are going to sleep? Because are you sure? Are you absolutely sure that you are living in a house that belongs to you?" I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud that sounded like a gavel coming down on a life sentence. The sound of the microphone hitting the stage floor was the only sound in the room for 3 long seconds. Then, the feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made half the guests cover their ears. I did not step back. I stood there, leaning on my cane, watching the realization wash over my parents like a tidal wave. My mother, Diane, was the first to break. She didn't scream this time. She slumped. It was as if the strings holding her up, the strings of denial and arrogance, had been cut. She sank into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Shaking her head, she knew the game was over. She knew that the document I held in my hand was not a bluff. It was a death certificate for the life she had been pretending to live. Harold, however, was a fighter, or rather, he was a cornered animal. "You are insane," he roared, stepping toward the stage. His face was a mottled purple. "That is my house. I have lived there for 30 years. I paid the mortgage, I paid the taxes." "You paid rent," I corrected him. my voice projecting clearly even without the microphone. You paid rent to a trust. You thought you were clever. Dad, you thought that by hiding the deed in a trust, you could protect the house from your creditors. You thought that if you made yourself the trustee, you could control it forever, but you forgot the most basic rule of a trust. I looked at Calvin. He stepped forward. A trustee has a fiduciary duty to the beneficiary, Calvin announced, his voice booming. When you engage in self-dealing, like living in the property rent-free or below market rate, or redirecting the beneficiary's mail to hide the asset, you breach that duty, and when you breach that duty, the trust dissolves. The asset reverts to the rightful owner. Calvin pointed a finger at me. Lindsay Scott is the owner of 442 Briar Creek Lane, and as her attorney, I am serving you with this. He pulled a document from his briefcase and held it up. This is a notice to quit. It is a formal eviction notice. In the state of Illinois, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. You cannot evict us, Harold screamed. He looked at the crowd, desperate for an ally. We are her parents. She is throwing us on the street. Look at her. Look at this monster. He turned to his brother. My Uncle Ted. Ted, tell her she is crazy. Uncle Ted didn't move. He looked at his shoes. Nobody moved. The social contract had been broken. People can forgive a lot of things, drunkenness, infidelity, even bad business deals, but they cannot forgive the theft of a child's home to pay for a party they are currently attending. It makes the champagne taste like bile. Then, Miles Lockwood moved. The groom walked over to the head table. He didn't look at Kelsey. He looked at his father-in-law. Is it true? Miles asked. His voice was quiet, dead. Is the house hers? It is complicated. Miles, Harold sputtered, trying to put his arm around Miles's shoulder. Legal mumbo-jumbo. We were going to work it out. We were doing it for the family estate planning. Show me the deed. Harold, Miles said. Harold froze. He didn't have the deed. He hadn't seen the deed in 6 years because he had hidden it in a safe deposit box that he could no longer access legally. Miles turned to me. He looked at the paper in my hand. He looked at the cane. He looked at the stiff, painful way I was holding myself. I am sorry, Miles said to me. Then he turned to Kelsey. Kelsey was sitting at the table, staring at a centerpiece of white orchids. She looked small. She looked young. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. She was a product of their dysfunction just as much as I was. But then I remembered the video she posted. I remembered the smirk when she asked if I was enjoying the $40 fish. Kelsey, Miles said. She looked up. Her mascara was running. I cannot do this, Miles said. But we are married, Kelsey whispered. We signed the papers. My lawyers will handle the papers, Miles said. He took the boutonniere from his lapel, a white rose, and placed it on the table. I am not starting a life on a foundation of fraud, and I am certainly not going to be the son-in-law of people who would rob their own daughter while she was in surgery. He walked away. Miles, Kelsey screamed. She stood up to run after him, but her dress, her $20,000 dress, caught on the chair leg. She stumbled, falling to her knees. It was a tragic image. The bride on the floor, the groom walking out, the parents exposed as thieves, and me, standing on the stage. I felt a hand on my back. It was Owen. We should go, he whispered. You have done it. It is over. Not yet, I said. I walked down the steps of the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked up to my parents. Harold was breathing heavy, panicked breaths. He looked at me with pure hatred. I have no daughter, he spat. You hear me? You are dead to us. I disown you. Do not ever come near us again. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, and then taught me that love was conditional on how much cash I could provide. You cannot disown me, Dad, I said softly. You sold that right. You sold our relationship for $425,000. You made a transaction, and now the transaction is complete. I placed the eviction notice on the table in front of him, right next to his wine glass. "You have 30 days, I said. "If you are not out, the sheriff will remove you. And Dad." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Make sure you leave the keys to the trust property on the counter," I said. "I would hate to have to charge you for a locksmith." We turned to leave, but as we walked toward the exit, Calvin stopped us. He was checking his phone. "Lindsay," he said, "one more twist." "What?" "The venue just called me back," Calvin said. "Or rather, their legal team did. When we flagged the deposit as illicit funds, they ran a compliance check on the wire transfers." He showed me the screen. "Your mother didn't just wire the money, she structured it. She broke the $425,000 into smaller transfers of $9,000 each to avoid federal reporting triggers before consolidating it. That is called structuring. It is a federal banking crime, and because she did it to pay for a service across state lines." "The FBI," Owen said. "The FBI," Calvin confirmed. "The venue has already filed a suspicious activity report. Your parents are not just looking at state charges for forgery. They are looking at a federal investigation for money laundering." I looked back at the head table one last time. Harold was yelling at a waiter. Diane was sobbing into a napkin. Kelsey was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect day. They weren't just evicted, they were ruined. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, exhausting sense of relief. The weight that I had been carrying for 36 years, the weight of trying to be good enough, trying to buy their love, trying to save them from themselves, was finally gone. I walked out of the tent. The night air was cool. The ocean sounded peaceful. "Let's go home," I said to Owen. 7 months later, I sat on the porch of our new house. It wasn't a condo. It wasn't in the city. It was a small bungalow near the lake, with a ramp for the days when my back still acted up, and a garden where I was learning to grow tomatoes. It was modest, it was quiet, and most importantly, nobody knew the address except Owen and Calvin. The recovery had been long. I spent 3 months in physical therapy, learning to trust my spine again. I spent 6 months in therapy for my mind, learning to trust myself again. I never spoke to my parents again. I heard about them. Of course, you cannot escape news like that. Harold and Diane pleaded guilty to reduced charges to avoid a federal trial. They got probation and restitution orders that they will never be able to pay. They are living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a different state, living off Social Security and whatever scams they can still pull. Kelsey didn't get married. The annulment was quiet. She tried to pivot her brand to survivor of family trauma, but the internet has a long memory, and the screenshots of her fundraising fraud kept resurfacing. She eventually went private. I heard she is working as a receptionist at a dental office, and the house on Briar Creek Lane. I didn't sell it. I couldn't live in it. Too many ghosts. But I couldn't sell it and take the money, either. It felt tainted. So I did what Grandma Margaret would have wanted. I broke the cycle. I partnered with a local nonprofit that helps women escaping financial abuse. I leased the house to them for $1 a year. It is now a transitional shelter. It is a place where women who have had their bank accounts drained, their credit ruined, and their confidence destroyed by the people who claim to love them can come to rebuild. It is a place where they can learn to stand on their own 2 feet again. I visited it once, just last week. I sat in my car across the street. I saw a woman sitting on the front porch, the same porch where my father used to smoke his cigars and plot his schemes. She was reading a book. She looked tired, but she looked safe. She looked like she owned her own life. I rolled down the window and let the breeze hit my face. People ask me if I regret it. They ask if the $425,000 was worth losing my family. They ask if I miss the illusion of having parents. I tell them the truth. I didn't lose my family. I lost a group of people who held me hostage. And I didn't win because they lost. I didn't win because they are miserable, or because I have a house. I won because, for the first time in 36 years, I woke up this morning and didn't check my phone to see if they needed something. I won because I stopped asking for permission to exist. I won because I realized that the most expensive thing I ever owned wasn't the condo or the house or the car. It was my peace, and that is one asset I am never, ever selling again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it reminded you that your boundaries are worth more than any inheritance. Please, I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and keep your receipts.